Have you ever met someone whose faith was so real, so honest, that it actually made people uncomfortable? Someone who didn't just quote the Bible, but wrestled with it, questioned it, and through those questions found truth deeper than blind acceptance? C.S. Lewis was one of those people. The man who gave us the Chronicles of Narnia, the world-famous defender of Christianity, was once called heretical by a dozen churches. But why? How could the man who brought millions closer to Christ be accused of betraying him? Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to LWN, and hit that bell icon, because today's story might just change how you see faith itself. Let's start with something we all experience: doubt. You know that moment when your prayer doesn't get answered the way you hoped? When tragedy strikes or silence lingers and you whisper, "God, where are you?" C.S. Lewis knew that feeling. He didn't hide from it. He wrote about it. After losing his wife Joy to cancer, he poured his grief into a book called A Grief Observed. It wasn't polished or perfect. It was raw, honest, painful. He questioned God's goodness. He admitted that his faith felt like a house of cards collapsing. And some Christians couldn't handle that kind of honesty. They said he's losing his faith. But was he? Or was he discovering what real faith actually means? Lewis once said, "Faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted in spite of your changing moods." And isn't that what most of us struggle with? When everything falls apart, faith isn't easy. It's not loud worship or perfect prayers. Sometimes it's just holding on. Let me tell you a story. A man once stood on the edge of a stormy sea, shouting his questions into the wind. He felt like Job, righteous but broken. And in that silence, he realized something. God wasn't angry at his questions. He was wading through them. That man could be you. It could be me. It could be Lewis. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the churches misunderstood. You see, C.S. Lewis didn't believe in a fragile faith that crumbled under doubt. He believed in a faith that grew through doubt. And here's where the controversy began. He once said something shocking. We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be. To many, that sounded like rebellion. But Lewis wasn't rebelling against God. He was rebelling against complacent religion. He saw a danger in churches becoming echo chambers, where questioning meant sin and thinking meant pride. That idea got him banned from 12 churches across England. Pastors claimed he was leading believers astray. They said he was too philosophical, too open, too dangerous. But Lewis believed truth could handle questions. He believed God was not afraid of honest seekers. And isn't that exactly what Jesus did? When Thomas doubted, Jesus didn't shame him. He said, "Put your finger here, see my hands." He met doubt with proof, not punishment. Jesus welcomed the wrestlers, the ones still finding their footing in faith. So here's the question. If Jesus made room for doubters, why do some churches still ban them? Why do we silence those who ask hard questions when faith itself was born in mystery? C.S. Lewis refused to play it safe. He spoke of heaven and hell not as distant myths, but as reflections of the choices we make daily, what we desire most, what we love most. He even suggested that hell might be locked from the inside, that the damned are those who refuse to let God in, not those God refuses to love. To many, that sounded heretical, but maybe it was just radical grace. You see, Lewis didn't believe in a God eager to condemn. He believed in a God desperate to redeem. And that's why his words still shake the walls of comfortable religion. So what do we do with a man like that? A man who loves Jesus deeply, but doesn't fit neatly in the churches? Boxes?
Do we label him dangerous or prophetic? Because maybe Lewis wasn't tearing the church down. Maybe he was trying to wake it up. If this thought is already stirring something in your heart, tell me in the comments. Write, "Wake us up, Lord," if you believe Christianity needs to rediscover its honesty and humility again. And remember, faith isn't about pretending you have no questions. Faith is daring to ask them while still holding on to God's hand. But what if some of Lewis's heretical views weren't really about doubt at all? What if they were about something far more dangerous, something that challenged the very structure of religion itself? C.S. Lewis didn't just challenge what Christians believed, he challenged why they believed it. He saw something dangerous happening in his time, something eerily similar to what we see today. People treating Christianity like a club, not a calling. A social identity, not a spiritual rebirth. And Lewis refused to play along. He once wrote, "The church exists for nothing else but to draw men into Christ, to make them little Christs." That one sentence, beautiful, radical, and dangerous, made certain church leaders furious. Because he wasn't defending an institution, he was defending transformation. Let's pause here. Have you ever felt like church became a performance instead of a presence? Like people sang the right songs, said amen at the right moments, but missed the heart of it all? Lewis saw it too. He wrote about how easily Christians could fall into religious theater, sounding holy but staying hollow. And that's when he began writing something no one expected, the Screwtape Letters. It's a story told through the eyes of a demon, teaching a younger demon how to distract humans from real faith. Sounds dark, right? But it wasn't horror. It was truth in disguise. In it, Lewis revealed how subtle evil can be, not through open rebellion, but through small distractions, pride disguised as faith, comfort disguised as peace, routine disguised as righteousness. And people hated it. 12 churches banned him from speaking, calling his work too imaginative, too irreverent, and even satanic. Imagine that! A man exposing the devil's tricks, accused of working for the devil himself. But here's the twist. Those same accusations mirror something Jesus faced. Remember when he healed on the Sabbath? When he ate with tax collectors and sinners? Religious leaders said the same thing. He has a demon. Why? Because Jesus broke their systems to reveal God's heart. Lewis, in his own way, was doing that too. He wasn't trying to offend the church. He was trying to purify it. He believed Christianity wasn't about safety. It was about surrender. Not about walls, but windows through which God's light could pour. He once said, "If you want a religion to make you feel really comfortable, I certainly don't recommend Christianity." That line hit hard, because real Christianity isn't cozy, it's costly. It demands change. It confronts pride. It calls you to forgive, love, and live differently. So ask yourself, do we still want that kind of faith? Or do we just want the easy kind? The Sunday-only kind, where we nod to Jesus but never follow him into the hard places? Lewis was banned because he dared to talk about these uncomfortable truths. He dared to say that many Christians live like half-converts, believing in God's power but never letting it transform their lives. He said, "We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us." To him, sin wasn't about breaking rules. It was about settling for less than God's best. And that's where his so-called heresy got even deeper. He spoke about heaven and hell in a way that flipped tradition upside down. He said, maybe hell isn't a punishment God gives, but a choice humans make. That the doors of hell are locked from the inside.
because love never forces itself. To the church, that sounded.
But to Lewis, it was the ultimate proof of divine love. God giving us real freedom, even the freedom to reject Him. He said, there are only two kinds of people, those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God says, in the end, "Thy will be done." Think about that. Every day, through our choices, we're answering that same question. Whose will do we follow? It's heavy, it's unsettling, but it's also deeply freeing, because it means every moment is an invitation to come home. Lewis believed that love must be chosen freely, or it's not love at all. And that belief made some religious people furious, because it meant they couldn't control salvation. They couldn't draw neat lines around who's in and who's out. Grace was bigger than their boxes. But Jesus said the same thing, didn't he? When the thief on the cross turned to him, Jesus didn't say, "Too late." He said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." That man never attended church, never tithed, never did a Bible study. But he believed, and that was enough. C.S. Lewis believed in that kind of grace, scandalous grace, transformative grace. And that's what made him dangerous, not to God's kingdom, but to human control. And maybe that's why he still speaks to us today, because deep down, we all want to believe that God's love runs deeper than our failures, that even in our darkest moments, heaven still whispers, "Come home." So let me ask you this. When was the last time you felt truly free in your faith? Not bound by rules or fear, but overwhelmed by love. Because that's what Lewis fought for. If that kind of faith is what you long for, write in the comments, "I choose real faith." Let's fill this space with hearts ready to move beyond religion and into relationship. But there's still one more reason C.S. Lewis was called heretical, a reason that might just be the most shocking of all. Because it wasn't just his ideas about heaven or hell, it was what he believed about who God might save. C.S. Lewis once wrote something that sent shockwaves through Christian circles, words that made even some of his closest friends question his faith. He said, "We do not know that only those who know Him can be saved through Him." To the average ear, that might sound confusing, but to many pastors and theologians at the time, it sounded like open heresy. What Lewis meant wasn't that all religions were equal or the truth didn't matter. No, he was saying something far more humbling. He was saying that God's mercy might reach farther than our understanding of it. That maybe, just maybe, there are hearts in distant lands, hearts that have never heard the name of Jesus, but somehow, in their hunger for light and goodness, they've been reaching toward Him all along. Now pause for a moment. Does that idea scare you, or does it move you? Because for Lewis, it did both. He wasn't saying everyone goes to heaven. He was saying that God's love is so vast, so wild, so beyond our comprehension, that we should never assume we've mapped its borders. And that made people furious. 12 churches cut ties completely, calling him a universalist in disguise. But Lewis never denied Christ as the only way. He just believed that Christ could reach people in ways we can't see. That maybe the shepherd still goes after the lost sheep, even when it's far outside our fences. And honestly, doesn't that sound a lot like Jesus? He didn't build walls around salvation. He broke them. He touched lepers, sat with outcasts, and forgave the unforgivable. He said, "I have other sheep that are not of this fold." And while scholars still debate that verse, Lewis took it as a reminder. God's story is bigger than our systems. That's not rebellion, that's reverence. Because when you realize how vast God's mercy might be, you stop judging and start loving. I want to tell you something Lewis once confessed in a letter. He said, When I lay these ideas before God, I do so on my knees.
He wasn't trying to be clever or controversial. He was trembling in awe of grace. He was saying, Lord, I don't fully understand you, but I trust that you are better than I can imagine. Isn't that faith? Not having all the answers, but trusting the one who does? That's the kind of humility Jesus praised in the parable of the tax collector. The Pharisee stood proud, listing all his righteous acts, while the sinner beat his chest and whispered, God, have mercy on me. And Jesus said it was the sinner who went home justified. Lewis understood that. He saw that the proudest sins often wore religious robes. He warned believers to be careful because pride can creep into faith more easily than anywhere else. He wrote, a cold, self-righteous prig who goes regularly to church may be far nearer to hell than a prostitute. That line alone was enough to get him banned, but it's brutally honest, isn't it? It's not about what you look like in church. It's about who you are when you kneel before God. Lewis knew that a broken heart was more holy than a polished image. And that's what made his words powerful. He didn't just teach truth, he bled truth. You can almost feel it when he writes about Aslan, the great lion in Narnia. When Aslan dies for Edmund the traitor, Lewis is whispering a gospel truth. Grace doesn't make sense. It's unfair. It's undeserved. And that's exactly what makes it beautiful. But still, people called him dangerous because he made Christianity too open, too compassionate, too alive. And yet, maybe that's exactly what the world needs again, a faith that breathes, questions, and burns with love. So let me ask you something deep. What kind of Christian are you becoming? One who defends the walls or one who opens the doors? Because the truth is, sometimes what we call heresy is just heaven breaking our human rules. Lewis's banned beliefs weren't attacks on the gospel. They were invitations to rediscover it. He wasn't saying God's truth changes. He was saying we must change to see it fully. He wanted a Christianity that was brave enough to think and humble enough to love. And maybe that's why his legacy still outlives his critics. He reminded us that Christianity is not a fortress, it's a fire. It's not about guarding God's image, it's about reflecting his heart. And when that truth finally sinks in, faith stops being fear and becomes freedom. So today, if you've ever felt like your questions made you unworthy, if you've ever felt pushed away by people who claim to represent God, hear this. Jesus is not intimidated by your doubts. He's not disgusted by your wounds. He's waiting with open arms for you to ask, to seek, and to come home. C.S. Lewis may have been banned from 12 churches, but heaven never closed its doors to him. And that's the final twist. The very thing people called heresy was actually grace in disguise. Because in the end, grace always looks like heresy to those who have forgotten mercy. So let's take this personally. If you believe that God's love is bigger than our boxes, if you believe His grace can reach the hardest heart, then write it in the comments. Grace wins. Let's flood this space with faith that refuses to shrink God to our limits. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Lewis was trying to say all along. That Christianity isn't about agreeing on every doctrine. It's about daring to love like Christ, even when it costs us everything. Because truth doesn't fear questions. Faith doesn't fear struggle. And love, real divine love, never fears being misunderstood. That's the kind of Christianity that can change the world. That's the kind of faith that will never be banned in heaven.